All right, thank you very much indeed for staying with us. We're moving now to talk about some international affairs, of course, that has implications for the entire world, including Nigeria. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict is something that has been very big in the news since October 7, and so we are looking at the latest, which is the ceasefire arrangement, and we've seen in the last couple of days, this swap of prisoners and all of that. We're looking at what indeed is going on with the ceasefire arrangement, what are the issues, and what indeed try to break down to make it simpler for those of us who are following and the rest of the world who tries to understand how this would eventually bring some level of peace and stability to that region of the world. We have joined us virtually this morning the spokesperson, the Israeli government spokesperson, Rachel Lester. Former Israeli government spokesperson, Rachel Lester. Good morning and thank you indeed for joining us on News Hub.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
All right. Let me start by asking you what you. I know that it was quite tough. Was quite a tough one to reach this stage in terms of the ceasefire deal. We heard that it was even eventually reached at the last minute after the mediators struggled to have the two sides agree on something. What do you make? Do you feel relief with what we have in terms of this agreement at this point in time?
I feel relief on the one hand, but I also feel a lot of trepidation on the other hand, because Hamas has shown every step of the way that they're untrustworthy and that they're willing to blow up the deal for their own terrorist agenda at any time. I was very nervous on Saturday when Hamas refused to turn over Arbel Yehud, the civilian woman that is still being held by a different terrorist organization in Gaza than Hamas. And for a while, it looked like there was going to be an end to the deal, and we were all very nervous following along Hamas's lies and treachery. But thankfully, we are moving forward, and Hamas is going to be releasing not only Arbel Yehud but also Agam Berger, the fifth female soldier, and one other hostage that they will all be released on Thursday, ahead of the scheduled hostage release on Saturday. And now in return, Israel is is opening up northern Gaza for civilians in Gaza to be able to go back and go back to northern Gaza. So I think the deal is continuing, not quietly. There have been some roadblocks, but the deal is still in place, and we are looking forward to getting our girls back in just a few days.
Rachel, Hamas is saying that she is not in their custody. I don't know how this would change the narrative. They're saying she's not in their custody, that it's in the custody of some other militant groups within Gaza there. I don't know, shouldn't this change the narrative for Israel?
Absolutely not. Hamas is the government of Gaza. Just like any other country elected a government to rule them, the Palestinian people elected Hamas to govern Gaza. And it's true they haven't had elections in many, many years, but they are still the functional government of Gaza. They're responsible not only for every hostage that a terrorist is holding captive in Gaza, they're responsible for taking out the trash on trash days. They're responsible for every single thing that goes on in Gaza, not only because they were elected to do so, but because that is the hold that they have over the Palestinian people, and that's what they're choosing to do. Just because a different terrorist organization is holding Arbel does not mean that Hamas is not responsible for her well-being, as it was Hamas that kidnapped her from her bed on October 7th, 2023. And it means that Hamas is responsible for getting her back, because Hamas is the government that we made a ceasefire deal with.
All right. One of the things that we have seen with the ceasefire is the return of displaced people from Gaza and all of that. Just a few days ago, the President of the United States of America, Donald Trump, suggested that neighboring countries like Jordan and Egypt should absorb some of these people who he said, will be returning to houses that have been demolished, communities that have been destroyed, which doesn't make sense to him. What do you make of this proposal? In any case, Egypt and Jordan had already dismissed this proposal. What do you make of it?
It's a really good question, and I can't comment too much about what other countries are saying at the time. But I will say that I think in a hypothetical world, it would be incredible and the right thing to do for other neighboring countries to take in Gazan refugees. I think that it is not only their responsibility as neighboring countries, but their responsibility as fellow Muslim majority countries to take in their brothers and sisters at their time of need. But I think in a realistic world, these countries have already shown that they are scared of letting in Gazan refugees, that they have caused a lot of problems for them in the past. And I think that, moving everybody out of the place that they call home is not a good solution in the long run. I think that it is time for Hamas, again, the government of Gaza, to take responsibility for the war that they brought onto their territory and rebuild themselves, as opposed to just sending people away to be taken care of temporarily. As you said, these countries have already shot down the proposal from President Trump, and I don't think that it's going to go anywhere further. But I think that it is a bit infantilizing for the people of Gaza to imply that they can't rebuild themselves. I think Hamas is very capable of building infrastructure, as they've shown to be. And, when they decide that they want to put their tools to the right place. And I think the people of Gaza deserve a chance to rebuild in the place that they call home.
Rachel, for many, this ceasefire agreement is a welcome development. At least one can ease a sigh of relief and breathe some fresh air. Enough of the news around casualties within Gaza and all of that. But this refusal by the IDF of Gazans moving into northern Gaza could bring about a breakdown, or rather a break of the ceasefire agreement. I don't know how this comes to you, Rachel.
No, they refused to let the Gazans go back for the last 2 days, but now this morning they started letting Gazans go back to northern Gaza in full force. So because I think it's a one for one, when Hamas violates the agreement, Israel has to show that they will not tolerate moving forward with the agreement in the same capacity until Hamas honors their agreement. So this morning, Hamas said that they will return Arbel Yehud and Agam Berger to Israel this coming week. And so once they held up their end of the bargain, Israel held up their end of the bargain as well. And now, as we speak, there are people moving from southern Gaza to northern Gaza, just like the ceasefire agreement stated. So Israel is not the roadblock in this negotiation or in this deal in any way. They are simply showing that when Hamas decides to break the deal, we will not move forward with the deal. And when Hamas decides to honor the deal, we will move forward with the deal.
All right. I know that one of the conversations around the world, even before the recent conflict, is the whole talk about the two-state solution. Can you let us into, what's going on in terms of whether indeed this ceasefire arrangement is going to then be extended to further conversations, and then maybe we're able to reach some kind of agreement? What is the state of the conversation around the two-state solution?
The state of the conversation is simple. There can be no solution moving forward until Hamas is out of power in Gaza. Hamas is the reason that this war started. Hamas is the reason that Gazan civilians are living in indescribably terrible conditions. They were living in undescribably terrible conditions before the war because of Hamas allocating all their resources to war and not to civilization. Until we have a government in power that is not also a terrorist army, there can be no solution. Until the Palestinian society does not value killing their own children more than letting Israeli children live, we cannot move forward. And that will take a lot of re-education from the outside world, from international aid organizations, from the UN, from other Muslim majority countries in the region. But there can be no solution moving forward until Hamas is out of power and Gaza is improved as a peaceful partner on our border that we can trust.
Let's expand the conversation a little bit more, and look at what Israel is going through at the moment. On several sides, Israel is bedeviled with different challenges. The last count I had was about 5 or 6 different borders concerns with Israel. What do you think the Donald Trump coming back into office could do in these concerns around Israel and its fight around its borders? What could this make for Israel?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear the last part of the question. What do I think about President Trump? What?
Coming into office. In 2020, he came about the Abraham Accord before he left office. Let's look at what you think his coming back to office can bring in terms of resolutions within the Palestinian states.
Like I said earlier, it's not my place to comment on other countries besides, what's going on in the Middle East. I do think that we left President Trump's former term on a good note with the Abraham Accords, and it could be hopeful that we will see another sort of peaceful stepping stone during this administration as well. But I have to say that my biggest priority right now is watching the war that we are currently in on all fronts. And not only does Hamas need to be removed from power, but Hezbollah needs to be removed from power in Lebanon. Hamas needs to be de-radicalized, like the people of the West Bank need to be de-radicalized from their support of Hamas and their, weekly, at this point, terror attacks. The Houthis in Yemen need to be defunded as well. Iran needs to stop. It's funding the terrorist organizations and committing cyber attacks in Israel. All of Israel's enemies need to be taken down. And if the U.S. government is able to help us in this regard, then that would be incredible. And if it is not able to help us in this regard, then we will continue fighting on our own.
All right. Earlier on, you said that there's no solution until Hamas leaves power. So that got me a bit worried, because I'm wondering, indeed, at the end of the day, it's the Palestinian people who determine who will govern them. So how are you going to, achieve that if the people of Palestine decide that going forward they want to retain Hamas as the government or as the people who will be in power? I mean, does it mean that we'll just be going around in circles? Isn't there, don't they have the right or reserve the right to determine who their leaders should be?
That's a great question. I would say that there are a lot more people in Gaza that hate Hamas, that are afraid of Hamas, that resent Hamas than we see in the media. And I think that we need to empower them, and they need to empower themselves to stand up against Hamas and say, no more bloodshed in our name, no more attacks on Israel, no more attacks on us. And that it's up to the people of Gaza who are moderate and afraid of Hamas, hate Hamas, to take their people back to a place of peace. Again, it's also important for outside organizations and other countries to come up with a plan to re-educate the systems in Gaza that are promoting terrorism and hate over peace and tolerance. And I think that it won't happen in the next year, it might not happen in the next 10 years, but I think that there are a lot of steps that need to happen in order to make Gaza a reasonable partner for peace on Israel's southern border. And I also think that you're right, the people of Gaza deserve to elect whoever they want, but if they elect a terrorist army to lead them again, then they will have to suffer the consequences of that. Any country in the world who democratically votes for a terrorist army to lead them cannot complain when that terrorist army starts a war that then brings them pain and suffering. And I think that if Gaza decides to come forward from this war after 15 months of seeing how bad Hamas was for their society and still wants them in power, then they only have themselves to blame when they have to suffer the consequences.
All right, Rachel, we have to let you go, but quickly, what is the mood like for the families of captives that were released. What's the mood like right now in Israel for those families?
Every Israeli is celebrating and joyous over the return of the 4 female hostages. We are so excited every day to see more and more reunion videos and reunion photos and see them taking a breath and coming back and just being able to breathe outside of captivity. We are also extremely distressed to learn every day about the psychological torture that they were going through in Gaza every single day, and reports keep coming out about different ways that they are scarred emotionally, psychologically from their time in captivity, and we all just wish them the best, the absolute best in recovering and moving forward with their lives. And we also can't wait to see the next hostages come home in just a few days.
All right, Rachel, thank you. Thank you for talking with us. This is what we want sustained. We want to see smiles and excitement and happiness across all faces, even in Israel and in Gaza going forward. Rachel Lester, thank you for your time with us on the show today. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.